Well, hello there. Do you know where you are? That's right. You've stepped into Half Moon Hallow. And do you know what time it is? It's Half Moon Hallow night, where it's forever dusk, and nightmares tuck you in. Darkness is a state of mind, and spookiness lingers like an aura. Beneath the pale silver glow of the half moon, spirits and shadows stir, waiting, watching. Darkness spreads, and with it, an ancient hunger long forgotten, a thirst for the macabre that makes the civilized shudder. Wait, what's that? Do you hear them? The whispers are growing louder now, nearly screaming. We're not alone. From the shadows and through the ethereal fog, they tell dark tales, tales of blood, tales of horror. Do you dare listen? Good. Thank you for joining us. And always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean they aren't there. Blood Moon, Shadows and Vampires by Tony Capobianco. Chapter 2. The floor still smelled like blood, no matter how much bleach the custodians had poured into the grout. It rode under the coffee and the disinfectant and the winter rain that had blown in when they propped the doors during cleanup. Fluorescence hummed with a low, wavering pitch that made everyone talk softer. A copier warmed itself and then thought better of it. The clock over the duty sergeant's desk ticked like it had learned a new language, one where each second arrived a little too late. Conno Castabello took all of that in without letting his face admit it. He kept his eyes on the corkboard, on the glossy 8x10s pinned at clean right angles, because order was a thing you could still perform. The photographs didn't blur when he looked at them. They had kept their fidelity, which felt like treachery. A wide shot of the lobby, glass panes spidered and fallen, shell casings like brass punctuation marks, a smear where a body had been dragged. A tight frame of the message on the wall, written with a finger that had known exactly how much pressure to put on blood to make the letters hold their shape. The trail of terror continues. Tut. It was steadier than the hand that had bagged the paper towel from the break room, where the same letters had been traced in rust red. It was steadier than the hand that had taped gauze to his temple when the world finally stopped roaring. It was steadier than his right hand now, which he put in his pocket so he wouldn't have to prove steadiness twice. Agent Castabello. The voice was low and clean and used to command rooms without raising itself. He turned. A woman in a dark suit and a rain-slick overcoat stood just inside the bullpen, hat in hand. Damp lashes framed grey-blue eyes that missed nothing. She had a folder tucked at her hip, and the particular stillness of someone who'd learned that sudden movements can draw the wrong kind of attention from the wrong kinds of things. Special Agent Lydia Marsh, she said, stepping forward. She flipped the case open just long enough for the shield to flash and the card to read. Aegis Task Force. A few heads in the bullpen lifted. A few heads bent to work. The sheriff, Melton, big shoulders and wind-burned cheeks and the look of a man who'd been awake for 30 hours on caffeine and obligation, hovered behind her, hat twisting between his hands. "Appreciate you coming, Marsh," Melton said. "Didn't think we'd ever need you." Lydia took that in without smiling. No one ever does. She shook Castabello's hand. Her palm was dry, warm, steady, and her eyes flicked, just for a second, to the butterfly strip near his hairline. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. The room didn't deserve the truth yet. "What's your picture?" she asked him, no preamble. He gestured at the board. 4 dead in the station, he said, voice even because he could still do that. 2 in the hall, 1 in the lobby, 1 in holding. Throats open, massive blood loss. There are bullet impacts in the drywall that don't match the officers' reports. Radios died before it started. The deputies who survived can't agree on the order of events. Lydia stepped closer to the board. The fluorescence painted a faint green on the smooth of her cheek. "Order fails in these kinds of events," she said softly. "It's one of the first things they break." "They," Melton repeated, like a man trying out a word he didn't want to own. Lydia didn't look over. "Whoever wrote that knows they're not alone," she said, eyes on the TUT in the photograph. "They know stories do more damage than teeth." She turned back to Castabello. "You saw something." He didn't say yes, because the part of him that kept him on the Bureau's payroll knew how to say less. He set his jaw, a small act of resistance against the memory of the jail's cinder block wall unknitting itself into something thin and dark and wrong. "I saw enough to move our witness," he said, "and I saw enough to know leaving him in that building would be malpractice." "Witness," Melton said, as if the word were a truce. "He's a suspect to half my guys." "He's a kid," Castabello said. He didn't add, "and he sounded like a lunatic yesterday, and now I can hear my own voice matching his cadence." Lydia's gaze shifted. "How old?" 17, Melton said. 18 next month. "Name?" "Adam Gabriel," Castabello said. Her eyebrow twitched up 0.5 millimeter at the last name. Not surprise. Recognition filed quickly away. "Where is he?" she asked. "Interview 2, Melton said. "We've kept him away from the cells. Something in his throat clicked when he swallowed. Superstitious, I guess." "There are worse instincts," Lydia said. We walked the hall. It was short and low and painted a colour meant to suggest calm in a catalogue. The place had been cleaned twice since they'd carted the bodies to the coroner, and still the air hummed with a quiet electrical dread. Castabello heard his own footsteps a half-beat late, like an echo that had missed its cue. Through the glass, a narrow room with a metal table and 4 chairs that didn't match. Adam sat on the far side, hands around a styrofoam cup he wasn't drinking from. He had a bruise on his jaw, the old plum colour that says yesterday, and a bandage tucked under the collar of his t-shirt where an EMT had taped it like the act of taping could stitch the world. He stared at the tabletop like he was afraid of what reflection might show up if he looked into the glass. Castabello opened the door. "Adam," he said. The boy flinched, only the eyes. They took in Lydia and tried to perform composure. He was bad at it in a way that made Castabello like him. "This is Agent Marsh," Castabello said. "She's here to help with the transfer." "Aegis," Adam said. The word was careful in his mouth. "Like a shield." "That's the aspiration," Lydia said. She didn't offer a hand. She took the chair angled to the corner, where she could see both the door and the boy. "You remember anything new?" Castabello asked. He took the seat across and set his hands palm down so the tremor wouldn't announce itself with a cup. Adam's throat worked. "I remember the sound the lights made when they stopped being lights," he said, "and the smell when the air turned into water." Melton made a small sound he probably didn't hear himself make. Lydia's face didn't change. "And him," Adam said very quietly. "I mean..." His mouth shaped a word and didn't let it out. "He can talk inside your thinking. If you think his name, he knows he's present." Castabello's stomach did a small, disloyal flip, because the cadence of that sentence might as well have been recorded out of his own head at 3 a.m. He put a palm on the file and let the weight of paper be a physical thing. "What does he want with you?" Lydia asked, soft enough that it sounded like care rather than interrogation. "Everything," Adam said. His voice wasn't dramatic. He sounded tired. "But he wants me first." "Why you?" Melton asked, and then flinched at the shape of his own demand, the human cruelty of it. Adam's eyes went to the corner of the ceiling and stayed there like there might be a saint in the acoustical tile. "He thinks I'm a good story," he whispered. "He thinks I make people afraid." Castabello had the thought he hated. He's right. He shoved his chair back a fraction, like he needed more room in his own skin. "We move now," he said to Lydia. She nodded once. "We move now." Rain had come in quiet and decided to stay. They crossed the lot under umbrellas, a little procession in an ugly world. The sodium lamps shook yellow halos onto the puddles. Their reflections rippled and stitched themselves. Somewhere deep in the pine line, A barred owl called once, and then thought better of it. The Bureau SUV was plain as bread. Marsh took the passenger seat without asking. Castabello drove. Adam slid into the back and pulled the belt across his chest and stopped a moment with the buckle an inch from its seat. He clicked it anyway and looked like he'd lost a bet with himself. Sheriff Melton stood under the awning and lifted a hand, the way men do when they run out of vocabulary and have to resort to semaphore. "Route?" Lydia asked, eyes already on the mirrors. 17 to the state, Castabello said. No ridge road. Fog sits there like wool, Lydia finished, not smiling. Yeah. He pulled out. Tires hissed. Wipers thunked. The world narrowed to their 2 cones of light. Coffin Falls fell away, one traffic light at a time. Lights blinking yellow for no one. Storefronts dark like they'd never been open. The waterfall itself a low whisper beyond the mill. The road should have been comfort. Black ribbon through trees. Asphalt that had learned hundreds of tires in 1,000 nights. Tonight, it felt like the road had been laid through someone else's house without permission. For the first 20 minutes, they said almost nothing. It wasn't the good silence of a shared weather. It was the silence of a room where everyone wanted to ask a question they knew would hurt. "You've done these transfers before," Castabello said finally, because he needed to put sound in the air. "I have," Lydia said. "And what are we transferring him away from?" He hated how careful that came out, like the question wore gloves. "Whatever staged your station," Lydia said. "Whatever has been acting through this county for weeks. Whatever left those women dry at the base of the falls." It wasn't a list so much as a laying down of cards. Castabello's hands tightened on the wheel. His wrists remembered the weight of last night. His gun, useless as a party favour. The sound of the wall forgetting to be structure. He forced his breath to go in and out in numbers. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. The world reduced to a metronome under the rain. "You believe me?" Adam said from the back, almost surprised. Castabello kept his eyes on the road. "I believe you saw what you said you saw. That's how it starts," Adam murmured, believing the verbs before the nouns. Lydia turned in the seat enough to see his face. "Adam," she said, "you told Agent Castabello yesterday you could feel him listening when you thought his name." "I shouldn't think about him," Adam said, chewing the words. "He likes it when He likes attention." Marsh's gaze flicked to the mirror. "Then don't give it to him." Adam laughed once, dry. "That's like telling someone not to think about fire while their house is burning." They drove through a long S-turn where the pines crowded in and the fog thickened, a living thing rolling lazy in the low spots. The sign warned of deer for the next 2 miles. A raccoon sat on the culvert, eyes 2 coins in the headlamp wash, and then blurred. But it wasn't the raccoon that lifted the hair along Castabello's forearms. It was the way the fog on the left shoulder bulged, as if something large had breathed in. 3 o'clock, Lydia said, exactly calm. "I see it," Castabello lied. Then he did see it, a suggestion of pallor between trunks, down low, moving with the economy of a predator that didn't need to waste second chances. He didn't speed up. He didn't slow down. He corrected 2 degrees left and then brought them back 1/2 degree right. The wheel felt too thin, the world too soft. "Do we call it?" he asked. "They're already called," Lydia said, which wasn't comfort. The first impact was roofwood, a deep drum slap that turned the SUV into a bell. The whole chassis dropped and rebounded on its shocks. Claws raked paint with a bright metal cry. Adam bucked against his belt and swore. Castabello's mouth was already moving. "Brace!" Because training lives in the jaw, even when belief dies. The second hit came a heartbeat later at Lydia's window. A face, too close, too wrong, slammed into glass and rode there, teeth scraping like someone dragging a fork across a plate. It wasn't pale like porcelain. It was the sallow, wax-slick white of something that had died inside a winter pantry. Its eyes were sunk deep and glowed not at all, no theatrical red, but there was a wet shine to them that made it feel like a living mouth was behind the sockets. The smile it made when it saw her see it wasn't a smile. It was the bearing of purpose. Lydia put 2 rounds through the glass without thinking now and thought later. The rounds took the thing's cheek apart and snapped its jaw sideways. It tore away from the window, grip sliding, then came back with angrier hands. The spiderweb crack ran across the pane and held for 1 more second on stubborn laminate. "Seat rods," Castabello snapped, hauling his headrest up one-handed. "Adam, catch!" He tossed the twin chrome bars back without looking. Adam fumbled, caught one by luck, got the second in a dying star of glass. A third body hit the rear door and the lock popped to protest. Failed. The door yawned open an inch, 2. Nails hooked fabric. Adam rammed 1 rod forward where a heart would live in an honest chest. The rod bit and slid off a rib with a gronk of metal on bone. The thing shrieked, not pain in the human register, but a frequency that made sinuses burn and a nerve behind Castabello's right eye light up. It pulled back a fraction. "Cross it," Castabello said, an instruction from nowhere, or from a childhood he didn't have. "What?" Adam gasped. "Cross the bars," Lydia said, already moving, her seatbelt digging into her collarbone as she twisted. "Now!" Adam jammed the 2 rods together just inside the threshold. Crude X, angle wrong, hands shaking. The vampire's reaching hand hesitated as if it had recognized a shape from a nightmare. It recoiled. Not theatrical, not garlic and Latin, more like a flinch knocked loose from a reflex that belonged to something older than the thing wearing this body. It hissed, a wet kettle noise, and rocked back. Space opened, 1/2 an inch, just enough for living. Another vampire poured over the hood, fingers sinking into the metal with a squeal, pale face slamming into the windshield. It dragged its nails in a slow curve that made a sound like someone whistling through teeth. Lydia popped the glove box with her knee, grabbed a road flare, raked it against the striker. White-orange magnesium leapt with a hungry snake's hiss. She threw it at the face on the glass and it flinched hard, eyes narrowing against light and heat. It didn't scream like the movies. It simply moved, faster than should be, off the hood and out of the light. The radio crackled, the dash went dark and on again, the speaker coughed static like old lungs, and then the static took shape and turned into a voice that made the temperature in the car drop like an elevator. "Take him," it said. Not loud, not a roar, an intimate command pressed against the inside of the skull. "The time has come. The boy is mine. I have such delicious plans for him." It was a voice with a faint metallic undertone, as if speaking through a thin sheet of copper. It resonated in tooth roots. It made the hairs on the back of Castabello's hands stand up like a cheap radio antenna finding a station. Adam made a sound that had no word in it. Lydia's eyes met Castabello's for a fraction, and in that fraction both of them understood they were not the point. They came out of the trees then in numbers that made numbers useless. Low and fast, all elbows and knees and hungers, pale shoulders against black pines, mouths open and not breathing. The first 3 had been proof of concept. This was policy. "Hold on," Castabello said, and the part of his brain that graded language sneered at him. The car was a bell again, many hands. Glass went to sugar, a rear door blew wide. Adam screamed, high and human, when 3 sets of hands found him at the same time and yanked his belt against his chest so hard the latch jammed. Lydia lunged back, seatbelt locking, gun jamming into the thing's cheekbone as if a pistol could be a fist. She fired once into its mouth so close she felt hot spray on her wrist. It rocked and then kept coming. Castabello yanked the wheel, stomped the brake, jerked the transmission into park so violently the lever protested. He was out before the car had stopped rocking, rain needling his face, pistol in one hand and headrest rod in the other, because belief might be late, but practice could still arrive on time. He hit the first vampire with the rod like it was a baton. The blow set its jaw at a new angle, and it looked at him, not angry, just interested. He drove the rod at the left chest where anatomy textbooks draw red hearts, and the vampire twisted with that crisp, horrifying economy, the rod skittering under skin along a rib. Heart, he told himself aloud, because sometimes you had to make the world small. Left of centre, 3 inches deep. He shoved again, blind and furious and terrified. The thin seized his wrist. The squeeze sent white up his arm and something like heat behind his eyes. It leaned in close enough that he could see a seam near its ear, where a surgeon had once done an ordinary human thing, like remove a cyst. For one insane heartbeat, the specificity of the scar made this all worse. "Conno!" Lydia's voice, somewhere behind him, a rope thrown. He tore free, skin burning under the clamp marks, and slammed a shoulder into the vampire. It moved back because it wanted to, not because he made it. He saw Adam go out the rear door, belly first, hands skittering for purchase. The boy caught the frame with his fingertips and left crescents in paint. 3 vampires dragged, a grotesque parody of Friends hauling a drunk to the curb, and then one of them moved with an awful, generous courtesy to free the jammed belt. Adam was loose. The night took him in like a mouth. "Don't," Conno said, as if language could be a chain. The voice again, amused now, tasting their names without needing to say them. "Run, little agents," it purred into their bones. "Run, and tell the world who owns the night." He did not look toward the trees. He would not give it the confirmation of his eyes. He fired twice into the body hauling Adam, not to kill, he already knew that wasn't on the menu, but to bruise, to slow, to make it notice pain out of habit. The rounds punched and did something, and did not do enough. "Back in the car!" Lydia snapped, voice low and command sure. She wasn't asking. She fired once more, a careful shot into an eye that at least forced a creature to flinch. She kicked a door closed on a grasping arm and slammed her shoulder into it until the latch found home in the rain. They fell into the car like it was a boat taking water. Lydia shoved the gear into reverse, spun the wheel, felt the back end fishtail. Pale bodies stuck and slid off. Claws squealed on glass. The flare on the hood hissed and went black and rolled sideways. And for half a second, Conno wanted to get out and pick it up and set it alight again, like a caveman guarding a stolen sun. They backed into darkness, and then forward into a darker stretch and kept going because that was a thing living people could do. The vampires paced the road for a bit, a terrible escort. They slowed in the tree line and watched. He felt watched. He could feel the focus on him, on the car, on the shape of them, like cold fingers on his brow drawing a sigil he could not read. The road widened. The trees backed off. The fog thinned into sullen mist. Lydia didn't take them into town. She took them to a truck stop with half its fluorescence dead and a neon open that sputtered like a heart with an extra beat. She parked in the back lot with the semis, killed the engine, sat with her hands on the wheel until the tremor turned into something she could catalogue. The ticking of metal cooling sounded absurdly domestic. Kono's breath soared in his throat. He set the pistol on the dash so the weight could be visible and not just a gravity in his hand. Glass glittered everywhere, like a mean confetti. Rain found its way through the broken seals and made small, steady sounds in the upholstery. "Call it in," Lydia said, voice steady because it had to be. He picked up the mic and had a moment of insane certainty that the voice would be on the other end. "Coffin Falls, Aegis," he said, and his voice worked, so that was something. "Ambush on County 17, mile marker 21, multiple hostile actors, civilian asset acquired by hostile leader. Officers, alive, uninjured? Officers mobile. Copy," came the dispatcher's whisper, a brave little human sound in a world that liked to eat brave little human sounds. "Units, hold locals at the junction," Lydia cut in. "Do not enter the tree line. Repeat, do not enter the tree line." She looked at Conno, and he had the sense she was looking through him to the memory of other nights. "Copy," the dispatcher said, softer. Holding. They let the mic hang. Conno leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a count of 4 and opened them again before the thing behind his eyes could show him its picture. His hands shook now that they had permission. He let them. He watched them shake and felt the humiliation and let that be a thing he could inventory. "Say it," he whispered, not sure if he was talking to his own brain or to the woman beside him. Lydia looked out through the cracked windshield at the parking lot. A man in the camo jacket came out with a paper sack. stood a second, and then went the other way like it remembered somewhere else to be. A stray dog shook itself and then curled under a tanker trailer with the confidence of an animal that knew how to live in the margins. "Aegis isn't a glossy task force with a better budget," she said. "We're a blacklight." She glanced at him. "We make the invisible visible. We catalogue it, we contain it. When we can, we neutralize it." His laugh came out sharp and small. "Neutralize." "Sometimes," she said. "Not often enough." "You knew," he said. "Not accusation, admission." "I knew before I had a badge," she said, "and it wasn't bravado, it was weary. You don't get assigned to Aegis. You get found by it." He thought of Adam saying the thing liked to be thought of. He thought of his own hand slamming into a chest and missing what mattered by an inch. He thought of the blood writing on the wall, of the neatness of the letters and the way the last T had run a little, like a promise. "Vampires," he said, and his mouth made the word like it was chewing on tin foil. Her face didn't change. "Yeah." "Bullets don't. No. Sunlight does. Yes. Stakes. If you're good and lucky. Crosses?" He didn't even know why he asked, except somewhere between the two headrest bars and the flinch he'd seen a pattern trying to be born. "They don't care about your religion," she said, "but the shape makes some of them remember things they don't like to think about. A beat. It's not what people think it is. Not blessings, not scripture." "What is it?" he asked. "Old business," she said, like the words were a door she wasn't ready to open. "Older than any church." He looked down at his hands. The grooves the vampire's fingers had left across his wrist had already started to purple. They looked like notes written by someone mean on a skin that belonged to someone else. He flexed his fingers and felt the pull. "Adam," he said. The name tried to break in his mouth. She didn't lie to him. "We'll look for him," she said. "We'll find where he is. We'll do the math on hours and see how much of him is left when we get there." He shut his eyes and saw Adam's sneaker rocking against the floor mat, heel, toe, with the rhythm of the road. He opened them fast. He said the guy thinks he makes a good story." "He does," Lydia said. "That's part of the cruelty. He's going to use the boy to write headlines." "Frame him," Conno said. "Make him tut. Make it look like he did this." "Anonymous tips," she said. "Dash cams that glitch. Locals who think they saw what they didn't. People like stories that keep the worst things human. It makes the night feel smaller." He let the back of his head touch the rest and stared through the cracked glass at the open sign, blinking with a weak heart. Somewhere behind his eyes, a whisper tried to take root. He didn't let it. "You're taking this, well," Lydia said, voice neutral, the checking of vitals. He barked a laugh he didn't recognize as his. 36 hours ago, I would have had a psych eval if I'd heard myself say the word. Now I'm asking for wooden stakes out of the county's procurement budget. "You're not crazy," she said, and there was something like kindness there, sharp-edged and real. "You're early." He rolled that around once and let it sit. In the side mirror, the world behind them looked like a mouth closing. Lydia picked up the mic again, her fingers steadier than they had any right to be. "Aegis to dispatch," she said. "We need a quiet room, no press, and I want names on every missing person in this county in the last 10 years. Patterns. Petty thefts around the dates, animal control calls. I want a map." "Copy," the dispatcher said, sounding older by 10 years and braver by 20. Lydia clipped the mic back in. For a long minute they listened to the engine tick as it cooled in the low hush of rain. A semi's brakes sighed like a man. "What now?" Conno asked. "Now," Lydia said. "We make it make as much sense as it ever will." She shifted in the seat and the glass in her hair made a small, pretty sound. "You don't have to do this, Castabello. You can write a report that says you were here, and you did your job, and you asked the right questions, and you turned the rest over to the people who watch the dark." He looked at her, at the steadiness there that wasn't bravado but a life. He thought of Adam being taken backward into fog, heels ploughing lines in grit. He thought of the voice liking the shape of their names. He thought of the wall forgetting what walls do. "I don't think the dark is going to let me give it back," he said, and it was the truest thing he'd said all night. She nodded once. "Once they see you," she said softly, "they don't stop seeing you. Once they mark you, you're either dust or you're trouble. Try to be trouble." He almost smiled. It didn't stick. He put the SUV in drive and pulled them back onto the blacktop. The night leaned down, patient. The wipers shrugged at the rain and began their work. Somewhere to the east, a thin seam of lighter grey promised morning in the way knives promise surgery. They passed a roadside memorial cross wreathed in plastic flowers gone chalky with sun. The high beams caught it, and, for a heartbeat, the cross looked like an ankh, looped and old and remembering. Out of the corner of his eye, in the ditch beyond, something pale flinched. He didn't turn his head. He watched the road. He counted breaths. He let his hands keep the car between the lines because there were still lines, and he could still keep them. Behind them, Coffin Falls held its breath. Ahead, the map refused to tell them its secrets. Between those two truths, the trail of terror continued. And two federal agents, one who believed and one who was learning how, drove into the part of the night that belonged to stories.